Almost 2 years ago, I said this.
If further Doom games keep going down that road, I might find myself estranged from the franchise that kept me interested in FPS games for years upon years.
It turns out to have my interest wane did not even take one additional Doom game. All it did take was some promotional material for Doom: The Dark Ages. I did not like the way it looked. The breakneck pace and acrobatics that defined Doom Eternal were gone, all for the sake of a shield that breaks in 2 hits and overly telegraphed parryable green attacks. It looked as if someone took the Marauder from the predecessor and made an entire game around whatever philosophy spawned this abhorrent insult to game design. I bought Doom 4 and Eternal Day 2, but did not get the Dark Ages on release. It's not like I gave up on the franchise, I was intending to play it someday. That being said, the pre-release material for the previous 2 games was so incredibly good that they were possibly 2 of my most anticipated games ever, while thankfully also delivering on all fronts. The material for the Dark Ages did not make me feel even 1% of that hype, and the price solidified my position. Now, over a year after release, having bought the game on a steep discount, I can confidently say, it's good. But for such a legendary franchise, is a good game success enough? There's a lot of disparate points I have comments on, and I am struggling to think where to start. It doesn't help either how drastically different the combat loop is. From the tight, acrobatic airborne movement of a hummingbird, we're now very much land-bound, like a clumsy hovercraft. Double jumping, dashing, meat hook, all are gone. In their place, a shield used to defend from attacks in the early game, but its durability quickly falls off as damage numbers ramp up, and parrying is left as its main function. Glory kills are almost gone. Can you believe that? The feature that superficially drew in and kept so many eyes on the series since 2015 has been toned down into borderline obsolescence. The take resources from your enemies philosophy remains, but has definitely been rewritten into a different language. Shield throwing, shield dashing, melee weapons, armor, shield runes. Oh my god, this is complicated. I was saying this about Doom Eternal 2, and now Doom has become an even more tangled and twisted web of strangely designed mechanics. But, you know what? It doesn't bother me much anymore, mostly because it's just what I've come to expect. How does it play out? Well, a lot of the time it's pretty fun, but other times the mechanics really don't feel like they work together well. Parrying or deflecting is a ubiquitous mechanic. It's a very simple, if uncreative, way of making a player learn the moveset of an enemy in order to strike them down. If a player must press block just before an attack comes in, they have shown both knowledge of the animation and also mechanical skill in timing the input. I usually prefer something more creative and unique, but this kind of mechanic does the job for me, as figuring out how to fight different enemies and how to use my own character is where most of the satisfaction comes from in action games for me. However, does any of this sound like I'm describing Doom: The Dark Ages? Because very little actually applies. The mechanic works similarly on a surface level. Attacks indicated by a green sheen can be parried, and this reflects damage if it's a projectile, but always builds towards a temporary stun of the enemy. However, first of all, the parry window is huge, and I'm not exaggerating. If you haven't played the game, this will sound like I'm trying to boast about my skills, but I really mean it when I say that, on a mechanical level, parrying the vast majority of attacks, even on nightmare difficulty setting, is absolutely of no challenge at all. The fact that each parryable attack is indicated by the green color also means that you always see them coming, and the challenge of learning a pattern is largely gone. There's only a few enemies that have very fast projectiles or deliberate mix-ups to throw you off that genuinely require some memorization. However, Overall, this mechanic is something you just do, and not something you learn to use for maximum efficiency. I will also bring up another big difference between deflecting in other games and deflecting in Doom. You see, usually, games with deflection mechanics are in third person. This means you can precisely see the spatial relations between the movements, attacks and weapons of both you and the enemy. In first person, it's a lot harder to know where your character begins and ends, and the point in time when an attack should hit you. Therefore, to compensate, parrying is extremely forgiving, not only in the timing. You can deflect attacks that aren't going to hit you. You can deflect attacks that are already behind you. You can even deflect attacks through walls. With all this being said, what even is the point of this mechanic? Well, simply put, it's to give you a way to survive and fight back the hordes when you've been stripped of most of your mobility tools from the previous games. And I'm surprised to say it works pretty well for this purpose, and the audio-visual effects are quite satisfying. That being said, as brought up earlier, it lacks in skill expression and depth. What happened to the methods of regaining resources? Instead of glory kills, we now have these basic melee attacks to finish off an enemy without a special animation. This change I actually like. I've already made my opinions clear on glory kills. I don't like how the control over my character keeps being given and then taken away from me, and the way I am subtly being jerked around is awkward. Now, most of this is gone in favor of a single strike animation that brings you closer to the enemy and preserving most of your control. If the enemy is not staggered, you use your melee weapon instead. Melee combat in my FPS? Well, not exactly. Those just feel like a replacement for both the chainsaw and the blood punch. They consume charges, require time to recharge said charges, drop ammo on hits, and have some auxiliary properties depending on which one of the three you choose. As far as I'm concerned, it's an upgrade from Eternal. That being said, I was expecting more fleshed out melee combat in a medieval entry to the series. I'm also not satisfied with how they did the classic Doom thing, where attacks will both bring you closer to the enemy, then bounce you back, and also lock your camera. It's almost like the melee combat is limited to some animation flashing on your screen, along with an enemy's reaction, which would look really awkward if you could aim anywhere. I also found the weapons not that important for ammo purposes. Maybe it's just because I was used to carrying a whopping 2 rounds of ammo in Doom Eternal, but it always felt like I was flooded in resources, and only needed to use my melee maybe 3 or 4 times per level. The weapons are probably my favorite part about this game. Instead of having 2 weapon mods for each, we now have 2 entirely separate weapons in a category with no alt fires, because the alt fire key is now occupied by the shield. They are pretty basic damage spewing hoses at their base, but upgrading them really teases out some uniqueness. The cycler is normally a slower take on a plasma gun, but upgrading it applies a debuff to enemies and makes them take more damage, while also arcing the status to nearby demons. The rocket launcher flips the self-damage into self-healing for a short period after parrying an attack. Firing many bullets into one enemy from the machine gun turns said target into a bomb, ready to be set off with a shield throw. It's complex, it's strange, and God knows it takes some getting used to. But it is surprisingly fun and refreshing. No longer are the ammo reserves as shallow as me. Quick swapping is dead. In fact, many weapons actually reward you for holding down your left mouse button. The accelerator builds fire rate and damage the longer you fire, as does the pulverizer. And to top off the whiplash, the ammo capacities feel jarringly high compared to Eternal. It works well together, but the balance is nowhere near as tight as in the predecessor. You can easily get through the game by ignoring up to, let's say, half your weapons. On my first playthrough, I gravitated towards the cycler for damage amplification, rocket launcher for healing, and chain shot plus super shotgun for dueling with big guys. Now, on my third playthrough, I'm using the super shotgun almost exclusively. Upgraded to its full, it deals silly damage, and it's not even worth the time applying the cycler debuff, because the output of lead really is that staggeringly good compared to everything else. These weapons are super fun to use, but I almost feel like they could have used at least one of the upgrades to be included with their basic kit. When starting to play the game, I was very disappointed at how boring they were for the first few levels. So, what exactly does this combine into? It's hard to describe. Many encounters have one super heavy type of enemy, such as a cyber demon, baron, or a buffed heavy, with a few heavy types, the meat and potatoes, your classic mancubi, hell knights, revenants, and the like, and then a sea of fodder, which have been degraded to actual trash. Despite their health being lowered all the way down to hell, they can still be an annoyance. The soldiers fire these wide lines, and the basic imps can throw out barrier projectiles. There's a lot of weird attacks in the game. There's projectiles, there's wide projectiles, there's barriers, melee strikes, AoEs, and hitscan bullets. Entering a fight, you must usually start by focusing on the heavies, or anything that can impair movement. Hopefully you can hide from the super heavies' ranged attacks, and then deal with them once you can focus. Stand and fight is the tagline of the game, and the way this translates into the gameplay is that the tougher enemies will often have hitscan or incredibly difficult to avoid ranged attacks, but will transform into a melee-based mode when you get close, letting you parry them repeatedly. Therefore, you extend your survivability by being near them and standing your ground. This works a lot of the time, but the encounter design doesn't always feel like it's made with those mechanics in mind. For example, there's this fight with one cyber demon escorted by two mancubi. The super heavy giant has a powerful machine gun at range, so you must get close to duel. But once you are close, you have to spend some time doing the dueling, in which time the mancubi will fire off these AoE gas bombs that linger on the ground, and you will be toast. Trying to engage with one of the mancubi at short range first will be difficult, because you will get a face full of either lead or more gas. You could use the shield saw to lock down one of the mancubi for a few seconds, but as soon as you have to parry a single attack, the stun is gone. This is one of the most frustrating encounters in the game for me. Another one has a beefed up revenant and respawning arachnotron. The former is a tough enough enemy to deal with on their own, because they temporarily turn into ghosts, and all of their ranged attacks have great tracking. The arachnotron is easy to deal with if you focus on them, but it's got a machine gun for range, and keeps respawning. You must kill the revenant to beat the encounter, but if you prioritize fighting the arachnotron, I often lack the time to get even a single hit in on the revenant, due to their invincibility before another one spawned. And if you focus the revenant, you will get shredded by machine gun fire. The last complaint about the combat I have is some enemy attack patterns. Agadan hunters, for example, almost all of their melee attacks are parryable, except for this one that also fires out a blade-like projectile. You can't really avoid it at close range due to how big it is, and it breaks through your shield if you're too close, meaning you're entirely vulnerable to another attack. This feels like something that just doesn't have counterplay, and results in guaranteed damage. Hey guys, this is me editing the video. Since recording that part, I've actually played the game a bit more, and I found that regardless of whether you are up close or far away, sometimes the shield breaks and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know what is going on, like, why does it sometimes break, why does it sometimes not break, I have no fucking clue. I feel like this is bad either way. So just wanted to correct this. There's other examples of similar situations, but that's the most obvious one I can think of. All that being said, when the combat works, it works well. Parrying is satisfying, if easy. The shield saw deletes groups of fodder. Weapons spill out damage and status effects to many more enemies than just the ones you're aiming at. You're recovering resources, The shield runes are devastating and give you some much needed breathing room. You're developing ways to deal with each threat. Arachnatrons are easy to take out from close range, so shield dashing into a face full of buckshot is a painless way to eliminate them. Revenants require a bit of focus to parry a projectile or two, but are then extremely vulnerable. Pinkies have unparryable melee attacks, so actually require you to stand back a bit to reflect their projectiles back at them. Sure, I complained about Green Eye attacks. Unnecessary invulnerabilities, strangely complicated abilities, weapons, but it was obvious the franchise was heading in that direction, so my expectations were adjusted accordingly, and at least we don't have anything as flow-breaking as the Marauder. Let's talk about some other things. Music, for example. It is no secret that I believe the music by Mick Gordon to be absolute masterpieces. Well, he's gone, and so are Andrew Hulshult and David Levy. Instead, we've got Finishing Move Inc. And let me tell you, the soundtrack is nothing special. I've never heard of them before, and I did some digging to see if they've worked on a similar project in the past, and I don't see them having made any metal video game music. And that's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like metal, made for a game that had to have metal because it's one of its defining features, created by a committee of people who don't work with metal. It's not bad. It sounds good, but a lot of the tracks are very monotonous, have barely any melody, don't use any strange and unique sounds or instruments. It almost feels like the music is missing some vocals to fill in this blank space. Mick Gordon's music had soul and personality in spades. It was aggressive, it was catchy, it was fitting, it had callbacks to classic Doom riffs. This soundtrack had none of that. I never felt like someone was enjoying making this music. I never felt like I heard an incredible riff that I just had to listen to again, and I haven't noticed any references either. I almost did not remember a single track after completing the game once, except for this one, just because the level it plays in is very long. The riff gets very repetitive, and it almost sounds like it's trying to call back to Nobody Told Me About Id from Doom 1, but never gets there. You know how Doom 4 and Eternal had reimagined takes on the classic At Doom's Gate for their title drops?
I assure you.
Well, now we have this instead. It sounds good, but some of that heritage and brand identity has been lost. Now, all that being said, there is one cool thing that the music does, and I honestly don't know how this happens. Especially in the first level, where the pace of the game is tightly controlled, and the player only has 1 or 2 weapons, and very limited abilities, the music feels like it's far more responsive to what is happening than basically any other game I've played. I cannot put my finger on it, but from my very first play session, I immediately felt like something was happening in the background. I know this is an extremely cliché thing to say, and I am cringing about it as we speak. I cannot believe these words are about to come out of my mouth, so surely there has to be something there because it felt like a rhythm game. Now look, I am just an idiot who got their hands on an editing software, so I could very well be seeing ghosts right now, but what I am dead certain of is that there's at least a few parts in the game where after you get a new weapon, the BPM of the music fits perfectly with the fire rate of said weapons. This, I am not imagining, and that is a cool thing about the music in this game, which I rarely see. Good job, there is something I will remember this soundtrack for. Now, how about the level design? Unfortunately, that's another area I've been disappointed with. Most levels fall into 2 categories. Some of them are an even more simplified and linear take on the style from Doom Eternal. The most complex level design you can expect are missions like the Sentinel Command Station, where you come back to the central area a whopping 2 times. Always following the little objective marker, of course. However, a lot of them are a straight line, the very thing that fans of classic shooters were making fun of in modern AAA games, back before Doom recovered its mainstream relevance. The other category of levels are the sprawling battlefields, pockmarked by intense encounters. You might notice that I used the word sprawling. This is a word some games use in their marketing to make you think the scale is huge and the game has a giant amount of content. However, sprawl is not a good thing. Something being sprawling means it takes up far more space than it should. It means it's poorly designed. In these sprawling battlefield levels, the arena encounters and the secrets are about the only meat, and everything else is hard to even call filler. It's borderline empty space. These levels, and even areas within them, all feel so bland and similar to each other. It's easy to forget some of them even exist. I will say though, some of the secrets hidden here are pretty inventive and fun to figure out, which is why I mentioned that as a strength. How about we ruin that strength by marking every single fucking secret on the map? Now you know for certain that this empty connective tissue is just empty connective tissue, with nothing interesting. The secrets are a joke in this game. Not only do you know where every one of them is as soon as you get near, some of them are honestly insulting to our intelligence to even call secrets. I'm talking of secrets like turning right instead of left, turning around. I don't even know how to describe this one. It's literally just an open passage like any other. Now, to be completely fair, there are secrets in this game that aren't handed to you on a silver platter. For example, there's 3 or 4 pickups in the game that are blocked off until you find and destroy 3 wolf statues, which are not marked on your map. The game doesn't even tell you this is what you have to do, it's just communicated through smart game design. However, this is also the most intellectually challenging thing the level design will expect of you. This game is a prequel to Doom 4 and Eternal, and I'm going to refer once more to H-Bomberguy's video on Deus Ex Human Revolution, but this time to another point he made. Prequels are really difficult to write into something interesting, for 2 main reasons. Firstly, they're necessarily going to be portraying events that the previous work didn't need to have in order to be interesting. Secondly, there's not much that can surprise us, as we already know what happens next. I'm going to add to this list a third problem, scope creep. When a prequel gets released, audiences might expect stakes and scope at least as big as they've had so far. But since this game takes place before the others, it makes the chronologically latter ones feel insignificant and tacked on. However, there's also one strength that a prequel can have over the source material, and that is depicting and elaborating on some event that is only vaguely brought up in the original. Well, not only does the story in this game fall into all 3 of these traps, it also doesn't capitalize on its one potential strength, but also makes the story in Doom Eternal look like fucking Shakespeare. Where do I even start? Because there's so little story content to talk of. The game takes place during the attacks of Hell onto the Sentinel people, the same civilization we saw the ruins of in Eternal. Doomguy is fighting alongside them because he hates Hell and protects innocents. In the start, it's clear he is, to some degree, under the control of the Makers, the angelic race of beings, which the Sentinels were worshipping at this stage. The first few missions can be summed up as, here's one battle, and here's another, and here's another. There is no character development, moral dilemmas, or even a specific goal being accomplished. There is a proper demon villain this time, Prince Azrak. That being said, the only plot relevance he has is that he is looking for something called the Heart of Argent. But would anything actually change in the story if he just wasn't there? Of course, the game ends with him dead, but what does that even accomplish? It's never really specified what significance he has or what power he commands over Hell. As we see in the final cutscene, the demons are still being demons. I still don't know if he's done anything at all during this game beyond getting his hands on the artifact. There's a ton of things that annoy me about this story, but I really don't want to spend all day nitpicking. In Doom 4 and Eternal, each level felt like we've achieved something specific and important, even if it wasn't particularly interesting. In the Dark Ages, there are many levels back to back where nothing is achieved beyond moving to the next level. Of course, it doesn't even capitalize on the one strength a prequel has either. I was hoping we'd see Doomguy's rise through the ranks, the Battle of Taras Nabad just after he got put through the Divinity Machine, the betrayal of Valen, the enslavement of the Elemental Wraiths, or Doomguy's entrapment. I think the only callback is that we do get to find out the context for Novik's words from the start of Doom 4, but that's all I can think of. Let's talk about the overall ambience. Scope creep is definitely something that we can see happening in the Doom franchise, and I think it will be harmful in the long term. From one installment to the next, everything has to be bigger, the stakes have to be higher, and the explosions more destructive. If the ante is not upped, then Hugo Martin will spontaneously combust, I guess. There's a few things here that piss me off, and I'm going to start with an easy one. Titans. In Doom 4, there were the remains of just one giant, a demon so huge and towering, which Doomguy somehow fought and triumphed over. This battle is left up to your imagination as to how it went down. Eternal does not leave things up to your imagination, as we see the remnants of a battlefield between Atlantis and the Titans. We fight exactly one Titan, the Icon of Sin, and it's a hassle to say the least. There's an entire level dedicated to just getting the weapon that will let us put it down, and another where we're chasing it down. Killing the icon is the climax of the game, and supposed to be the most impactful thing we do. In the Dark Ages, we fight titans literally by the dozen. Turns out killing one is as easy as firing enough bullets into it, or just punching them with a big mech. It strongly devalues large portions of what we've done in previous games. Or how about Cthulhu? Yes, this game has Cthulhu because I suppose someone just had to include another popular thing in their computer game. I don't really have a problem with our first encounter and victory, but the way he's then brought back in a mechanized form and fistfights us for a boss encounter feels intensely disrespectful and just as if someone completely missed the point of cosmic horror. Remember that Cthulhu is a character of cosmic horror. It's a genre that speaks to our profound sense of helplessness in the face of vast voids and beings we can only glimpse. Now, that doesn't mean you can't adapt him and have some fun. However, the moment you turn him into a literal plastic toy, you're the one who ends up looking like a clown instead. It just feels like you've added a popular thing that you know nothing about yourself. So many of the events and story beats just feel like they've been included for style and flair over substance. Oh, and the Atlants. Of course, you play with fucking Atlants in this game, because someone just couldn't help themselves. The fact that this gameplay loop made it anywhere near the full release of a AAA $70 video game makes me weep for the future of the medium. If you'd taken the Atlan levels from this game and released them as a full game 40 years ago, it would have been considered basic and underbaked. I cannot believe how the minds that gave us Doom Eternal somehow couldn't come up with anything even a smidgen more interesting. I don't even know how to characterize these sections because there's just nothing to do. There's no mechanical or intellectual challenge here at all. If big robots throwing fists on your screen is all you need to be happy, then I'm glad for you. But fuck me, can we really not do any better? The cousin to the Atlan sections are the dragon sections. And they are better. Slightly. Firstly, they actually feature some rudimentary form of level design. The Atlan missions are just squiggly lines with zero branching paths, exploration or secrets. Their counterparts actually feature areas to explore and even secret landing zones with traditional sections. Dodging attacks is ever so slightly more demanding too, because you might actually have to pick the correct direction, as opposed to just being required to press space to completely nullify the threat. I'm not exaggerating, by the way. There are situations where I dodge, the dodge completely ends, and then the attack should have hit me, but it goes right on by. I do feel like these areas are too big, cluttered and confusing to navigate, and it's a shame that the dragon just wastes your time between the sections of actually playing as the Slayer. There is one thing that really pisses me off here to an utterly irrational degree. These little hell ships, but not by themselves. Sometimes they fly around an area and you can intercept them and destroy them for gold. They don't fight back, so it's a trivial endeavor, but that's not the annoying thing. Each of the dragon levels requires you to go down some hidden, narrow little passageway at least once to progress, and they can be hard to spot sometimes. Therefore, occasionally, a hellship will spawn out of thin air to guide you where you need to go, and you will follow it like a good little boy. The very first time this happened, and I emerged on the other side, I caught onto what is happening. And it shouldn't be pissing me off so goddamn much, but it does. Being treated like a little fucking infant baby. I know where I'm going, and there's only one way I can go in this tight tunnel, but I'm still following the carrot because I want the gold, and I'm feeling like an absolute fool the whole time I'm doing it. On a technical level, I'm not sure if I can comment much, as I haven't experimented a lot. My rig is aging by now, and I should probably look for an upgrade soon, but by no means is it bad. Without DLSS, the game was hovering at around 60 frames, which is acceptable, but there was constant micro-stuttering, which made the framerate feel far lower, and the game less responsive. I turned on DLSS, which fixed these problems, but in the name of... what exactly? Doom The Dark Ages has forced ray tracing, and despite this, I can't in good conscience say it looks better than Doom Eternal. Both technically and artistically, I really cannot point to anything that I feel looks any better, but there are many problems I've encountered. After launching the game, it still stutters and freezes like a motherfucker, until at least a few minutes have passed. When loading into a level, many props and environment details can take a solid few seconds to load in completely. In some cutscenes, the characters and props might just not load in at all, or just halfway. I don't like how blurry the game looks overall. I don't like how some elements of the HUD will blur out massive chunks of your screen, which really fucks with my brain. After playing for some time, I really did not appreciate how dark the game is. And no, the irony is not lost on me that I am playing a game called The Dark Ages, but it's still annoying how low the visibility is sometimes. In some areas, it's very difficult to spot enemies or human characters. It looks so strange and unprofessional how you have really serious and threatening enemy designs, like the Mancubus, clashing with just how fucking goofy the fireballs they shoot are, or the Lost Souls. They just look out of place. The game calls itself medieval themed in promotional material, but let's be real, it's very much sci-fi, with a dash of fantasy like in Eternal. The second level, for example, I was convinced was a UAC facility because they just look so goddamn similar. Oh, by the way, this level is called Habeth. Habeth, the thing on Mars. The Habeth that was before our time with the Sentinels? What's up with that? I feel like I could be sitting here, dissecting everything that works and doesn't for hours, but I feel like I should be wrapping up soon. If I had to sum it up, this game doesn't really know what it wants to be, and strays even further from what Doom should feel like. Extremely complex weapons, extremely complex enemies, status effects, cooldowns, turret sections, sprinting, hit scan bullet hoses, lacking exploration and secrets. Style over substance. The game feels like it was made by someone with a fantasy of seeing big and epic things on their screen, for people who want to see big and epic things on their screen. The combat is the meat and potatoes in this game, and it is fun. The way the weapons and abilities are designed is very interesting and satisfying. However, I can't help but feel like it does not live up to Doom 4 or Eternal in its polish and intensity. I find myself getting stuck on geometry, getting hit by enemies immediately after respawning, some enemies not respawning after I retry an encounter, the gold counter telling me I found all the gold as soon as I've started the level, taking damage through a parry. I find myself thinking this feels more like a AA game inspired by Doom, as opposed to the trend-setting gold standard of the previous games. I like it, and I will keep playing it for some time, but I am not impressed. Thanks for watching. Hey guys, I hope you liked the video. If you do, I would really appreciate if you hit like and subscribe. I want to get monetized, which would help me spend more time and effort making these videos. So if you want to see that, you know what to do. Thank you, bye bye.